The moment I heard the back door of my workshop rattling at 9 in the morning, I knew it was going to be one of those days. I had moved to Ridgewood Estates in Boulder, Colorado, 6 months ago, thinking the planned community would be a peaceful place to work on my custom furniture business. The homeowners association seemed reasonable at first glance, but that illusion shattered within the first week when I met Patricia Harrington, the HOA president, and the most insufferable woman I had ever encountered. She had objected to the color of my mailbox, the type of grass seed I used, and even the brand of garbage cans I put out on collection days. My name is Paul Yardley, and I built custom furniture for high-end clients across Colorado. When I bought the house on Maple Ridge Drive, the heated workshop in my backyard was the selling point. The previous owner had used it as an art studio, and it was fully permitted and up to code. That did not stop Patricia from making it her personal mission to find something wrong with it. The rattling grew more insistent. I was standing in the middle of my workshop with Fire Marshal Greg Thompson, going over the final inspection for my new ventilation system. The installation had cost me $12,000, but it was necessary for the finishing work I did. Marshal Thompson was in the middle of examining the ductwork when we both turned toward the sound. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked, lowering his clipboard. "No," I said, "but I have a pretty good idea who it might be." The door handle jiggled violently, and then I heard a metallic scraping sound. Someone was picking the lock. Marshal Thompson's eyebrows shot up and he reached for his radio. Before he could key it, the door swung open and Patricia Harrington stepped inside, her face flushed with triumph. She was wearing her usual uniform of pressed khaki pants, a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, and expensive running shoes that had never seen a day of actual exercise. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly that it gave her a permanent look of surprise, and she clutched her tablet like a weapon. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, probably to launch into whatever complaint she had prepared. But then she saw Marshal Thompson in his official uniform. Her face went from triumphant to pale in about 2 seconds flat. "Oh," she said, freezing in the doorway, "I did not realize you had company." Marshal Thompson stepped forward, his expression hard. "Madam, did you just break into this building?" "I did not break in," Patricia said quickly, regaining some of her composure. "As the president of the Ridgewood Estates Homeowners Association, I have the authority to inspect any structure on HOA property that may be in violation of our community standards." "This workshop is on my property," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is 15 feet behind my property line, well within the boundaries of my lot. You have no authority here. Your workshop is visible from the street and therefore falls under aesthetic review," Patricia shot back. "And I have received multiple complaints about noise, smells, and potential fire hazards." Marshal Thompson held up his hand. "Madam, I am going to need to see some identification and documentation that gives you legal authority to enter private property without permission." Patricia's face reddened. "I already told you, I am the HOA president. We have bylaws that clearly state, HOA bylaws do not supersede Colorado law regarding trespassing and breaking and entering," Marshal Thompson interrupted. "I am going to ask you one more time. Do you have written permission from Mr. Yardley to be on this property?" "I do not need his permission," Patricia insisted. "The HOA covenant gives me the right to inspect for violations." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Marshal Thompson, for the record, I did not give Patricia Harrington or anyone from the HOA permission to enter my workshop. The door was locked, and as you witnessed, she picked the lock to gain entry." Patricia's eyes widened when she saw me recording. "You cannot record me without my consent." Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings, I said. I only need my own consent. Marshal Thompson, as a witness, did you see Mrs. Harrington use what appeared to be lock-picking tools to open my door? I heard the lock being manipulated and saw the door open without the use of a key, Marshal Thompson confirmed. Madam, I strongly suggest you leave this property immediately and contact an attorney. Patricia sputtered for a moment, then seemed to collect herself. This is ridiculous. Paul, you know very well that your workshop has been a source of complaints since you moved in. The noise alone is enough to warrant an investigation, not to mention the fire risk of all those finishing chemicals you use. Which is exactly why I am here, Marshal Thompson said. Mr. Yardley contacted our office to schedule a voluntary safety inspection of his new ventilation system. Everything I have seen so far exceeds code requirements. The system is state-of-the-art, properly installed, and includes fire suppression capabilities. That information seemed to deflate Patricia somewhat, but she was not ready to give up. What about the noise? Our community has strict quiet hours, and I have personally heard power tools running at all hours. I work from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, Monday through Friday, I said. Well within the allowable hours outlined in the HOA covenant, I have never run equipment outside those times. That is not what my neighbors say, Patricia insisted. Then your neighbors are lying, I replied. I have security cameras that timestamp all activity in and around my workshop. I would be happy to provide that footage to anyone who asks, including law enforcement. Marshal Thompson cleared his throat. Madam, unless you have official business with Mr. Yardley, you need to leave. Right now. If you refuse, I will call the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and report a trespassing incident. Patricia glared at me with such intensity that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. This is not over, Paul. The HOA board will be hearing about this, and we will find a way to address your workshop situation. Our community has standards, and you will comply with them. She turned on her heel and marched out of my workshop, leaving the door wide open behind her. Marshal Thompson and I watched her storm across my yard and disappear around the side of my house. That was interesting, Marshal Thompson said mildly. How long has she been harassing you? Since the day I moved in, I admitted. She seems to have made it her life's work to find something wrong with my property. My grass is too long or too short. My car is parked at the wrong angle. My garbage cans are out 10 minutes too early. It is exhausting. You should file a police report, he said seriously. What she just did is a crime. Breaking and entering, trespassing, possibly stalking depending on how long this has been going on. Document everything. I have been, I said. I started keeping a log after the second week. Every complaint, every interaction, every email and letter from the HOA. My attorney has copies of everything. Marshal Thompson nodded approvingly. Good, keep doing that. Now let us finish this inspection so I can get out of your hair. From what I have seen so far, you are going to pass with flying colors. We spent the next 45 minutes going through every aspect of my ventilation system. Marshal Thompson tested the airflow, checked the electrical connections, examined the fire suppression system, and reviewed all the permits and installation documentation. By the time we were finished, I had my official approval certificate and a newfound appreciation for doing things the right way. You are all set, Marshal Thompson said, signing off on the final paperwork. This is one of the nicest workshop setups I have seen in a residential area. Whoever installed this knew what they were doing. I hired the best, I said. I figured it was worth the investment to do it properly. After Marshal Thompson left, I sat in my workshop for a while, trying to process what had just happened. Patricia breaking in was a new low, even for her. The lock on my workshop door was not exactly high security, but it was not something you could accidentally open either. She had come prepared with tools, which meant this was premeditated. I pulled out my laptop and downloaded the security footage from my cameras. I had 4 cameras covering different angles of my property, and all of them were motion activated with cloud backup. I found the footage of Patricia approaching my workshop and zoomed in. She had looked around carefully before pulling out what looked like a lock pick set from her pocket. She had worked on the lock for about 90 seconds before getting it open. I made copies of the footage and sent them to my attorney, Daniel Morrison, along with a detailed email explaining what had happened. Daniel had been my lawyer for years and had helped me with the business side of my furniture company. He was expensive but worth every penny. My phone rang about 20 minutes later. It was Daniel. "Paul, please tell me you are joking about the HOA president breaking into your workshop," he said without preamble. "I wish I was," I replied. "I have video evidence and a witness. The fire marshal was standing right there when she came in." Daniel let out a low whistle. "That is incredibly stupid on her part, breaking and entering on private property with a witness. She just handed you a golden ticket." "I want to file charges," I said. "This has gone too far. She has been making my life miserable for 6 months, and now she is literally breaking into my buildings." "I agree completely," Daniel said. "Forward me all the security footage and any documentation you have about previous incidents. I am going to contact the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and file a formal complaint. You should also get a restraining order." Her behavior qualifies as harassment at this point. "Will a restraining order even work if she is the HOA president?" I asked. "Does she not have some legitimate reason to be on the property for HOA business?" "HOA authority has limits," Daniel explained. "They can enforce covenant rules through proper channels, which means written notices, hearings, and fines if necessary. They absolutely cannot break into locked buildings without your permission or a court order. Even if there was a legitimate safety concern, she would need to go through proper legal channels first." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we go on the offensive," Daniel said. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He loved cases like this. "We file criminal charges for breaking and entering and trespassing. We file a civil suit for harassment and emotional distress. We get a restraining order to keep her off your property. And we file a formal complaint with the HOA board to have her removed as president." "That seems like a lot," I said hesitantly. "She broke into your property, Paul, with tools, while you were meeting with a fire marshal. She is lucky that is all we are doing. If she had damaged anything or if you had not been there, this could have been much worse." Daniel had a point. "Okay, do whatever you think is necessary. I am tired of dealing with her nonsense." "Leave it to me," Daniel said. "In the meantime, I would suggest upgrading your workshop security. Better locks, more cameras, maybe an alarm system. Make sure she cannot pull this stunt again." After hanging up with Daniel, I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work. I had a custom dining table due to a client in Denver next week, and I was behind schedule thanks to all the time I had spent dealing with HOA issues and getting my ventilation system approved. The table was made from reclaimed barn wood, each piece carefully selected and joined together to create a rustic but elegant piece. I lost myself in the work, running the pieces through my planer and checking the fit. By 6 o'clock, I had made decent progress and was feeling better about my timeline. I locked up the workshop, this time checking the door twice to make sure it was secure, and headed back to my house. My home was a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a decent-sized yard. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I had been proud of it until Patricia started her campaign of harassment. I made dinner and was settling in to watch the news when my doorbell rang. I checked my phone to see who was on my front porch camera and groaned. It was Patricia, flanked by two other people I recognized as HOA board members. Bruce Wellington was the vice president, a retired accountant who seemed to agree with everything Patricia said. Denise Carroll was the secretary, a softer-spoken woman who rarely contributed to meetings but took excellent notes. I considered not answering, but I knew that would only make things worse. I grabbed my phone, made sure it was recording audio, and opened the door. "Patricia," I said neutrally. "What can I do for you? We need to discuss your behavior this morning," Patricia said crisply. "You threatened me with a false police report and had that fire marshal intimidate me while I was attempting to perform my duties as HOA president." I stared at her in disbelief. "You broke into my workshop. I did not threaten you with anything. I simply pointed out that you had committed a crime." "I did not break in," Patricia insisted. "The door was unlocked." "That is a lie, and we both know it. I have security footage of you picking the lock." Bruce stepped forward. "Now, Paul, let us all calm down here. I am sure this is just a misunderstanding. Patricia was only trying to investigate complaints from concerned neighbors. Surely you can understand that." "What I understand is that she trespassed on my property, picked the lock on my workshop door, and entered without permission. None of those things are legal, no matter what her title is." Denise spoke up for the first time. "Paul, the HOA does have broad authority to investigate potential violations. It is outlined in the covenant you signed when you purchased your home." "The covenant does not give anyone the right to break into my buildings," I said firmly. "I have spoken to my attorney and he agrees." "Criminal charges are being filed." Patricia's face went red. "How dare you? I have dedicated 5 years to this community, maintaining our standards and property values. Your refusal to cooperate is putting everyone at risk." "At risk of what exactly?" I asked. "Having a neighbor who runs a legal business out of a properly permitted and inspected workshop. The fire marshal literally signed off on my ventilation system this morning. There is no safety issue." "There is the issue of your attitude," Patricia snapped. "You have been hostile and uncooperative since the day you moved in. You do not attend community meetings. You do not participate in neighborhood events, and you consistently disregard our requests for compliance." "I do not attend meetings because every time I do, you spend the entire time singling me out for criticism. I do not participate in events because I work for a living, and I have complied with every legitimate request in your covenant. Everything else is just harassment." Bruce held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Gentlemen, ladies, I think we are getting off track here. Paul, what would it take to resolve this situation amicably? Patricia needs to stay off my property unless she has my explicit written permission. No more surprise inspections, no more showing up unannounced, no more complaints about things that are not actually violations. Leave me alone and we will not have a problem." "That is completely unreasonable," Patricia said. "As HOA president, I have a responsibility to ensure compliance with our community standards. I cannot do my job if homeowners are allowed to bar me from their property." "Then I guess we will let the courts sort it out," I said. "Now, unless you have something else to discuss, I would like to have my dinner in peace." Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but Bruce put a hand on her arm. "We should go. This is clearly not productive right now." Denise nodded in agreement, already backing away from my door. Patricia glared at me for another moment, then turned and stalked back toward the street. The other two followed, with Bruce casting an apologetic look over his shoulder. I closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. This was getting out of hand. All I wanted was to live quietly and run my business without constant interference. Was that really too much to ask? My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. He had filed the initial police report and requested an officer come take my statement. Someone from the Boulder County Sheriff's Office would be contacting me within the next 24 hours. He also said he was drafting the restraining order paperwork and would have it filed by end of business tomorrow. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, I was glad to be taking action. On the other hand, I knew this was going to escalate things significantly. Patricia did not seem like the type to back down easily, and I was essentially declaring war on the HOA president. The next morning, I was in my workshop by 7, trying to make up for lost time on the dining table project. I had just started routing the edge profiles when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize with a Boulder area code. "This is Paul," I answered. "Mr. Yardley, this is Deputy Sarah Matthews with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. I am calling about the report your attorney filed yesterday regarding a breaking and entering incident at your residence." "Yes, thank you for calling," I said, setting down my router. "When would you like me to come in to give a statement?" "Actually, I was hoping to come to you," Deputy Matthews said. "I would like to see the property in question and review the security footage in person. Would this afternoon work, say around 2 o'clock? "That works perfectly," I said. "Should I have my attorney present?" "That is up to you, but it is not necessary for the initial statement. This is just a fact-finding visit at this point." We confirmed the time and address, and I immediately called Daniel to let him know. He said he would try to make it, but had a court appearance that might run long. If he could not be there, he wanted me to be careful about what I said and stick to just the facts. Deputy Matthews arrived exactly at 2, driving a marked patrol car. She was in her mid-30s, professional and thorough. I showed her the workshop, pointed out the door and lock, and pulled up the security footage on my laptop. She watched the video 3 times, taking notes each time. "That is pretty clear," she said. "She definitely used tools to manipulate the lock. And you are certain you did not give her permission to enter?" "Absolutely not," I said. "She did not call, text, email, or knock on my house door before going to the workshop. And as you can see from the timestamp, I was already inside with Fire Marshal Thompson when she broke in." "I will need to get a statement from Marshal Thompson as well," Deputy Matthews said. "But based on what I am seeing here, you have a solid case for criminal trespass and possibly burglary, depending on whether the district attorney thinks her intent meets the threshold." "What is the difference?" I asked. "Criminal trespass is unlawfully entering someone's property. Burglary requires the intent to commit a crime once inside. If she was just snooping, that is trespass. If she intended to damage property, steal something, or do something else illegal, that is burglary." "I think she was just snooping," I admitted. "She has been trying to find violations to report since I moved in. She probably thought she would catch me doing something wrong." Deputy Matthews nodded. "That still constitutes criminal trespass. I am going to forward this to the district attorney's office with a recommendation for charges." "You should hear something within a few weeks." "What about a restraining order?" I asked. "My attorney is filing paperwork for that." "That is handled through the civil courts," she explained. "It is a separate process, but cases like this usually qualify. You will need to show a pattern of harassment, and that you have reason to fear for your safety." "I have documentation of every interaction with her over the past 6 months," I said. "She has complained about my property at least twice a week, shown up unannounced multiple times, and now she has broken in." "Does that qualify?" "It should," Deputy Matthews said. "Make sure your attorney includes all of that in the filing. The more evidence you have, the better. After Deputy Matthews left, I tried to get back to work but found it hard to concentrate. The whole situation was stressful, and I kept checking my security cameras to make sure Patricia was not lurking around somewhere. Around 4 o'clock, I got an email from the HOA. It was from Bruce, the vice president, and it was surprisingly conciliatory in tone. He said the board had met in emergency session and discussed the incident from yesterday. While they supported Patricia's efforts to maintain community standards, they agreed that all future property inspections would require written notice and permission from homeowners. He apologized for any inconvenience and hoped we could move forward positively. There was no mention of Patricia being disciplined or removed, which annoyed me, but at least it was a step in the right direction. I forwarded the email to Daniel with a note asking what he thought. He called me back within minutes. "That is good news and bad news," he said. Good because they are acknowledging there was an issue. Bad because it is a clear attempt to undermine your case by making it look like they are taking corrective action. "So what do I do?" I asked. "Nothing changes," Daniel said. "We proceed with the criminal charges and the restraining order." An email from the vice president does not erase what Patricia did, but it does show that the board knows they have a liability problem, which works in our favor. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week. Daniel filed the paperwork on Thursday, and we got a court date for Tuesday morning. In the meantime, Patricia was required to stay at least 100 yards away from me and my property pending the hearing. I did not see or hear from her for several days, which was a relief. I finished the dining table and delivered it to my client in Denver. They loved it, and I got a partial payment that helped ease my financial stress. Running a small business was tough enough without having to spend thousands of dollars on legal fees. The Tuesday hearing was held in Boulder County District Court. Daniel met me outside the courthouse at 8:30, and we went through what to expect. He said these hearings were usually quick and straightforward. I would present my evidence, Patricia would have a chance to respond, and the judge would make a decision. Patricia arrived with her own attorney, a stern-looking woman in an expensive suit, who immediately tried to negotiate with Daniel. She wanted us to drop the restraining order in exchange for Patricia agreeing to stay off my property voluntarily. Daniel refused without even consulting me. "Your client committed a crime," Daniel said flatly. "A voluntary agreement does not address that or provide any real protection for my client. We will take our chances with the judge." The hearing started at 9. Judge Robert Carlson was a no-nonsense man in his early 60s who seemed annoyed that he had to deal with an HOA dispute. He listened as Daniel presented the evidence, including the security footage, Deputy Matthews' report, and documentation of Patricia's harassment over the past 6 months. Patricia's attorney, whose name was Linda Sawyer, argued that her client's actions were taken in good faith as part of her HOA duties. She claimed the lock was already open when Patricia arrived, and that Patricia had knocked several times before entering. She also argued that the restraining order would prevent Patricia from fulfilling her responsibilities as HOA president. Judge Carlson watched the security footage twice, then asked Patricia directly if she had used tools to open the lock. Patricia hesitated, then said, "I may have used a small tool to help with the door, but it was stuck, not locked." "Mrs. Harrington, there is video evidence showing you manipulating the lock for approximately 90 seconds before gaining entry. The door was clearly locked, and you did not have permission to enter. Do you dispute these facts?" Patricia's face went pale. "I believed I had the authority as HOA president to inspect the property for safety violations." HOA authority does not include breaking and entering, Judge Carlson said sharply. Even if you had concerns about safety, you should have contacted code enforcement or fire services, not taken matters into your own hands. He shuffled through some papers on his desk, then looked up. I am granting the restraining order. Mrs. Harrington, you are to stay at least 200 yards away from Mr. Yardley's property at all times. You may not contact him directly or indirectly, including through other HOA board members. If HOA business requires communication with Mr. Yardley, it must go through his attorney. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year, at which point Mr. Yardley may petition for an extension if necessary. You understand? Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Linda Sawyer put a hand on her arm and said, "Yes, Your Honor, we understand." Additionally, Judge Carlson continued, I am forwarding the evidence from this hearing to the District Attorney's office with a strong recommendation for criminal charges. Mrs. Harrington, you should expect to hear from them soon. We left the courthouse with the signed restraining order in hand. Daniel was pleased with the outcome, though he warned me that Patricia might still try to cause problems indirectly. She cannot come near you or your property, but she can still file HOA violations through the board, he explained. If that happens, we will deal with it. Just keep documenting everything. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since moving to Ridgewood Estates, I felt like I might actually be able to live in peace. That feeling lasted exactly 4 days. On Saturday morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, signed by Bruce Wellington as acting HOA president, informing me that my workshop was being declared a nuisance structure. The notice claimed that the workshop exceeded allowable square footage for accessory buildings, that it was too close to the property line, and that it generated excessive noise and odors. I was being given 30 days to remove the structure or face daily fines of $250. I stood on my front porch, staring at the notice in disbelief. The workshop was well within the size limits for accessory buildings. I had checked the covenant carefully before buying the house. It was also at least 15 feet from the property line, which exceeded the required 10-foot setback. And I had just been approved by the fire marshal for my ventilation system, which eliminated any odor concerns. This was retaliation, pure and simple. Patricia could not harass me directly anymore, so she was using the HOA board to do it for her. I took a photo of the notice and texted it to Daniel. He called me back within 5 minutes, and I could hear the anger in his voice. "This is exactly what I was worried about," he said. "They are trying to use the HOA as a weapon now that Patricia has been sidelined. Do not worry, we are going to fight this. Forward me a copy of your property survey, the building permits for the workshop, and the fire marshal's approval. I am going to tear this notice apart." "Can they really force me to remove my workshop?" I asked, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Not if everything is legal and permitted, which it is," Daniel assured me. "What they are doing is called selective enforcement. They are singling you out because of the dispute with Patricia. That is illegal and gives us grounds for another lawsuit." "I am getting really tired of lawsuits," I admitted. "I know, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. These people are not going to leave you alone unless we make it painful for them to continue. Trust me on this." Daniel drafted a response to the HOA notice, detailing every inaccuracy in their claims and threatening legal action if they pursued it further. He also filed a complaint with the Colorado HOA office, which regulated homeowners associations in the state and investigated abuse of power claims. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office contacted me about Patricia's criminal case. They had reviewed the evidence and decided to file charges for criminal trespass in the first degree, which was a Class 5 felony in Colorado because she had used tools to break in. If convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison and a fine of up to $100,000. I felt a pang of guilt about that. I did not actually want Patricia to go to prison. I just wanted her to leave me alone. But Daniel reminded me that she had committed a real crime and needed to face consequences for her actions. If she gets a slap on the wrist, she will not learn anything, he said. She will just be more careful next time. The only way to stop people like this is to make the consequences outweigh their desire for control. Patricia's preliminary hearing was scheduled for late June, about 6 weeks after the initial incident. In the meantime, life went on. I worked on my furniture projects, dealt with clients, and tried to ignore the increasingly hostile atmosphere in the neighborhood. Some of my neighbors were supportive. The Johnsons, who lived 2 houses down, stopped by one afternoon with a casserole and an apology for how I had been treated. Dave Johnson told me he had resigned from the HOA board 2 years ago because he was tired of Patricia's power trips. She drives off good people and surrounds herself with yes men, he said. Half the original board members quit within her first year as president. The only ones left are Bruce and Denise, and they are too afraid of her to push back. Not anymore, I said, telling him about the restraining order and criminal charges. Dave's eyes widened. Good for you. Someone needed to stand up to her. She has gotten away with this behavior for way too long. Other neighbors were less friendly. I started getting dirty looks when I checked my mail. Someone left a nasty note on my car windshield calling me a troublemaker who was ruining the neighborhood. And one morning, I found my garbage cans tipped over and trash scattered across my driveway. I cleaned it up and added more security cameras. If someone was going to vandalize my property, I wanted evidence. The HOA's attempt to force me to remove my workshop fell apart quickly once Daniel submitted his response. The Colorado HOA office sent an investigator who reviewed all the permits, the property survey, and the covenant language. They concluded that the workshop was fully compliant and that the HOA's notice appeared to be retaliatory. They issued a warning to the board and ordered them to withdraw the violation notice immediately. Bruce sent me a terse email saying the matter was being dropped due to procedural issues. There was no apology, no acknowledgement that they had been wrong, just a grudging admission of defeat. Patricia's preliminary hearing arrived on a hot morning in late June. I took the day off from work and met Daniel at the courthouse. The hearing was held in a smaller courtroom than the restraining order hearing, and it was much quicker. The district attorney presented the evidence. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that her actions did not rise to the level of a felony, and the judge decided there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Patricia looked terrible. She had lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Her attorney, Linda Sawyer, approached Daniel after the hearing. "Can we talk about a plea deal? Mrs. Harrington has no criminal record and this situation has already cost her significantly. She has stepped down as HOA president and she is willing to make financial restitution." Daniel glanced at me. We had talked about this possibility. Part of me wanted to push for the maximum penalty, but another part just wanted to move on with my life. "What kind of deal?" I asked. "Plead guilty to misdemeanor trespass. Pay restitution for your legal fees and security upgrades, and a formal written apology," Linda said. "No jail time, but she will have a criminal record." Daniel and I stepped away to discuss it privately. He said the decision was ultimately mine, but a plea deal would guarantee a resolution without the uncertainty of a trial. If we go to trial, There is always a chance a jury could be sympathetic to her or think the charges are too harsh, he explained. A plea deal guarantees she has a criminal record and pays for what she did. It is not the maximum penalty, but it is justice. I thought about it for a long moment. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of stress and legal bills and hostile neighbors. I just wanted to get back to building furniture and living my life. I will accept the plea deal on 3 conditions, I said. First, full restitution for all legal fees, security upgrades, and lost work time. Second, a restraining order that stays in place for 5 years instead of 1. Third, she has to attend anger management counseling. Daniel relayed my terms to Linda. She talked to Patricia, who looked like she wanted to refuse, but eventually nodded in defeat. We hammered out the details over the next week. Patricia would plead guilty to misdemeanor criminal trespass, pay me $32,000 in restitution, attend 26 weeks of anger management counseling, and stay away from me and my property for 5 years. The plea deal was formalized in early July. On the day of the sentencing hearing, Patricia read a prepared statement apologizing for her actions and acknowledging that she had overstepped her authority. It sounded sincere, though I suspected her attorney had written most of it. Judge Carlson accepted the plea and imposed the agreed-upon sentence. "Mrs. Harrington, I hope you take this experience to heart," the judge said. "Being in a position of authority does not give you the right to violate other people's rights. If I see you in my courtroom again for similar behavior, I will not be so lenient." Patricia nodded and left the courtroom quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. The restitution check arrived 2 weeks later. It covered all my legal expenses, the cost of upgraded security for my workshop, and compensation for the time I had lost dealing with the whole situation. It was a significant amount of money, but honestly, I would have paid twice that to make the problem go away. Life in Ridgewood Estates slowly returned to normal. Bruce Wellington took over as HOA president and was significantly more reasonable than Patricia had been. He sent out a memo to all homeowners clarifying the limits of HOA authority and emphasizing that inspections would only be conducted with permission or proper legal authority. He also formed a committee to review the covenant and remove outdated or overly restrictive rules. I started attending community meetings occasionally, mostly to make sure no one tried to pull another stunt like the workshop violation notice. To my surprise, most of the homeowners were friendly and welcoming. Several people apologized for not speaking up sooner about Patricia's behavior. We all knew she was out of control, but no one wanted to be her next target, one neighbor admitted. "Thank you for standing up to her. You made this neighborhood better for everyone." My furniture business continued to grow. The drama had actually generated some unexpected publicity when a local news station did a story about HOA overreach and featured my case as an example. I got several new clients out of it, including a high-end hotel in Vail that wanted custom pieces for their lobby. I also started dating someone I met through a client referral. Her name was Tessa Fletcher, and she was an interior designer who had seen my work and wanted to collaborate on a project. We hit it off immediately, and within a few months, she was spending most weekends at my place. She loved my workshop and even helped me design some new pieces. "You know what I love most about this space?" Tessa said one Saturday afternoon as we were finishing up a coffee table together. "It represents you standing up for yourself and not letting anyone push you around." "That is incredibly attractive." I laughed and pulled her close. "I am just glad it is over. For a while there, I thought I might have to move just to get away from the stress." "I am glad you did not," she said. "This place is perfect, and you earned the right to be here in peace." She was right. I had earned it, and I had learned some valuable lessons along the way about standing up for yourself, documenting everything, and not being afraid to fight back when someone tries to bully you. About a year after the whole incident, I ran into Patricia at a grocery store in Boulder. She was in the produce section, and we made eye contact before I could turn away. For a second, I thought she might ignore me or cause a scene, but instead she walked over. "Paul," she said quietly, "I know I am not supposed to talk to you, but I wanted to say something if you will let me." I glanced around, making sure there were witnesses in case this went badly. "Okay. I have been going to counseling like the judge ordered," she said. "It has helped me realize that a lot of my behavior came from a need to control things because other parts of my life felt out of control. That does not excuse what I did to you, but I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. You did not deserve any of that." I studied her face, trying to gauge if she was being genuine. She looked different, softer somehow. The hard edge that had always been present was gone. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "I hope counseling continues to help you." She nodded. I moved out of Ridgewood Estates. I could not handle living there after everything that happened. I am in an apartment now, which is actually kind of nice. Less responsibility, less stress. "That sounds good," I said, and I meant it. "Anyway, I will let you get back to your shopping," Patricia said. "I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, really sorry." She walked away before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, processing the encounter. It was not the grand reconciliation you see in movies, but it felt real. And it gave me a sense of closure that I had not realized I needed. I finished my shopping and drove home to Ridgewood Estates, where Tessa was waiting with dinner plans and ideas for our next furniture project. As I pulled into my driveway and saw my house and my workshop, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. The whole ordeal had been exhausting and expensive, but it had taught me something important. You cannot let people push you around, even when they have official titles or claim to be acting in everyone's best interest. Sometimes the right thing to do is stand up, document everything, and fight back through proper legal channels. My workshop stood in the backyard, fully permitted and approved, with its state-of-the-art ventilation system humming away. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for: my right to run my business, to use my property as I saw fit within legal limits, and to live in peace without constant harassment. The HOA never bothered me again. Bruce Wellington turned out to be a competent and fair president who actually improved the neighborhood without resorting to Patricia's tactics. Property values in Ridgewood Estates went up, not because of strict enforcement of petty rules, but because people felt good about living there again. I expanded my workshop the following spring, adding another 200 square feet to accommodate larger projects. This time, I made sure to submit all the paperwork to the HOA in advance, though I suspected it was just a formality. Bruce approved it within a week with a friendly note saying it looked great and asking if I could build him a custom desk. My business continued to thrive. The publicity from standing up to the HOA had brought in clients from across Colorado and even neighboring states. I hired an apprentice, a young woman named Sarah who was studying woodworking and needed hands-on experience. Teaching her the craft reminded me why I loved this work in the first place. Tessa and I got engaged that December. I proposed in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished projects, because that space represented so much of who I was and what I had fought to protect. She said yes, without hesitation. "I would not want it any other way," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "This workshop is part of your story, and now it is part of ours." We got married the following summer in a small ceremony in my backyard. The Johnsons came, along with several other neighbors who had supported me during the fight with Patricia. Even Bruce Wellington attended, bringing a bottle of excellent wine and congratulating me on finding happiness. "You know, you really changed this community for the better," Bruce said during the reception. "Standing up to Patricia was not easy, but it needed to happen. The HOA is supposed to serve the community, not terrorize it. We lost sight of that for a while." "I am just glad it is over," I said honestly. "Though I would not change how it turned out. I learned a lot about myself and what I am willing to fight for." As the sun set on my wedding day, I looked around at my home, my workshop, my new wife, and our friends and neighbors. This was what mattered. Not perfect grass or matching mailboxes or arbitrary rules enforced by petty tyrants. Just people living their lives, supporting each other, and building something meaningful. The story of Patricia breaking into my workshop became something of a legend in Ridgewood Estates. New homeowners would hear about it and ask me questions. I always told them the truth, that I stood up for my rights, documented everything, and used the legal system to protect myself, and that they should do the same if anyone tried to bully them. The restraining order remained in place for 5 years as agreed. I never saw Patricia again after that encounter in the grocery store. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Arizona and was working as a paralegal. I hoped she had found peace and learned from her mistakes. My workshop continued to be the heart of my business. I built dining tables, coffee tables, bed frames, custom cabinets, and artistic pieces that were more sculpture than furniture. Each project was a labor of love, and each satisfied client was proof that I had been right to fight for my right to do this work. Years later, when people asked me about the whole HOA situation, I would tell them it was one of the hardest things I had ever gone through, but also one of the most important. It taught me that standing up for yourself is not just about winning or losing. It is about drawing a line and saying this is where my rights begin and your authority ends. The workshop still stands today, a testament to that principle. Every time I unlock that door and step inside, I remember the day Patricia broke in and froze when she saw the fire marshal. I remember the fear and anger and frustration. But mostly, I remember that I did not back down. I fought for what was mine and I won. That lesson is worth more than any piece of furniture I could ever build. And every day, as I work in that space, I am grateful that I found the courage to stand up to a bully who thought her title gave her unlimited power. Because it taught me that in America, even a small business owner in a modest house can fight back against injustice and win, as long as you are willing to document everything, get good legal help, and never give up. The workshop sits there still, 20 feet by 30 feet of heated workspace where I create beautiful things from raw wood. It is exactly the same size it was when Patricia tried to force me to tear it down. The ventilation system still runs perfectly, just as the fire marshal approved. And the lock on the door is now a high-security deadbolt that cannot be picked without serious effort and noise. But honestly, the lock is not really necessary anymore. Patricia is long gone, the HOA is reasonable again, and my neighbors are friends rather than adversaries. The whole experience, as terrible as it was while it was happening, ended up making my life better in ways I never expected. So yes, HOA Karen broke into my heated workshop and froze when she saw I was meeting the fire marshal inside. And yes, she faced real consequences for her actions. But the real story is not about her downfall. It is about a regular person standing up for his rights and proving that bullies only have the power we give them. Once you take that power away through documentation, legal action, and sheer persistence, they crumble. That is the lesson I carry with me every day, and it is the lesson I share with anyone who asks. Stand up for yourself. Document everything. Get good legal help. And never let anyone make you feel small just because they have a title or a position of minor authority. My workshop is my castle, and no one will ever take it from me again.